India has always been blamed to be inferior by the Western media. Western media has always tried to blame us or put us down.
What George W. Bush had said about India, that India is a warmonger. The perspective, that sort of narrative has always been spread about India. This time what's happened is kind of different to a certain extent, especially in the lead up to the 3-day war. It was very clear by this time that Pakistan is a state sponsor of terrorism. This nation doesn't have a history, it has a criminal record.
Briefing of Operation Sindoor was happening, whether it was the press conferences by starting from our foreign secretary with our two lady officers to eventually the DGMOs, all was very well pinpoint and completely accurate. Like you couldn't point out any mistake in that. Do you think a situation like this or a scenario like this was shown very visibly for the very first time in India?
Certainly for the very first time. We have been historically very bad at putting our perspective forward.
When you for the first time saw PM Modi's speech, how was your reaction?
Prime Minister was clearly at times visibly angry. He was not trying to be diplomatic in the address to the nation. When President Trump tweets about India, anything, and Prime Minister Modi makes it a point to very quickly respond very warmly to whatever Mr. Trump has said.
But not this time.
This time Prime Minister Modi completely ignored Trump's tweet.
Thank you so much, Abhijit sir. I know we have been chasing you a lot since a long time. We were planning to do this. Finally able to do this online, but perhaps in future we could do this in offline as well sometime soon.
Thank you so much for having me, and I look forward to doing this in the future with you face to face in person.
I wanted to talk to you about this narrative thing that has been very much, I think it has been prevalent in history as well, but that time there were certain ways, and you know better than me or anyone else that how it used to work, how messengers used to spread the words among the the population that this is going to happen, this king is going to do this. This time, I think it's like every person is a messenger. Every person having a mobile phone is a messenger, and they can eventually go ahead and do whatever they want to do, and every small thing leads up to a particular narrative. Concerning with this particular Operation Sindoor, and India has always been blamed to be inferior by the Western media. Like we have a legacy that whenever India has tried to do something so outrightly, Western media has always tried to blame us or put us down. But this time the things was so well planned that even they were also not able to like put out a finger on India that this is something which is not good or which is fake. So yeah, I just wanted to, for the beginning, wanted to get your perspective on this. How do you see this from a narrative war standpoint? Is this a new start for India, starting with this Operation Sindoor?
It certainly is kind of an inflection point in some ways. You're right that the media, the Western media especially, has usually tried to blame India whenever there is any kind of conflict or tensions with Pakistan. I remember when I was a little kid, I once looked at a Newsweek magazine or Time magazine or something from 1971, in which India and Pakistan are shown as equals. They're boxers fighting each other. And I remember that the headline was what George W. Bush had said about India, that India is a warmonger. So that sort of perspective, the perspective, that sort of narrative has always been spread about India. This time what's happened is kind of different to a certain extent, especially in the lead up to the 3-day war. What happened is that it was very clear by this time that Pakistan is a state sponsor of terrorism. Even before the fighting started, their foreign minister or defense minister, I don't know who it was, whatever his title is, he had gone on Western media.
Defense minister.
He had said this repeatedly, that Pakistan has been doing the dirty work of terrorism on behalf of its Western masters for decades, whether it's the US, the UK or whoever else. That happened. And Bilawal Bhutto, who is probably the information or something minister, he also went on Western media and said the same thing. And this is a nation that has been discovered to have sheltered Osama bin Laden. This is the nation that sent terrorists to India in 2008, and so on and so forth. It's got a dirty, terrible track record. This nation doesn't have a history. It has a criminal record. So it's very hard for the West to kind of, defend Pakistan when something like the Pahalgam attack happens. And that's why I think everybody was expecting that India will take some kind of action. What really surprised the Western media is the magnitude of the action that India took. They thought it would be something like another surgical strike or maybe another airstrike, and that would be it. Just to appease the public of India and to satiate them. But this time it was very different. It looked like we were going for the jugular. So initially, the Western media was completely subdued about the matter. And once the airstrikes start and the missile strikes start, we start hitting their air bases and nuclear storage sites. That's when the West seemed to have gone into a panic. And after the so-called pause or ceasefire, whatever you want to call it, happened, after that, the narrative has been kind of anti-India. For example, CNN has been verbatim repeating the Pakistani claims of bringing down I don't know how many fighter planes and whatnot. And there are other West media outlets that are kind of equating India and Pakistan and saying that they have both struck at each other and hit each other equally hard and so on. When we know that the truth is different. The facts are different. I mean, when we say that we hit X number of Pakistani air bases, we have demonstrated that we have evidence to back it up. There is satellite imagery that even the Chinese are putting up that show that we have caused so-and-so damage to so-and-so air base. In the case of what the Pakistanis are claiming, there is zero evidence to back it up, and yet the Western media is parroting their lies. So there is still this narrative war that's being fought against us, and what are the reasons? We can get into that. But to come back to your point, in the run-up to the conflict, the Western media was very subdued. But once the conflict started, and especially after it went into a pause, they have been favoring Pakistan, and they are back to their old games of trying to paint India as not the aggressor this time, but definitely a nation that has not been the winner in the war.
And why do you think, what leads up to that? Even, we say that we are a country which is so developed, and we are hosting G20, we are meeting good people, we have so many alliances at place. Then why the media is so much after India to pull it down?
Yeah, well, the Western media is the world's most powerful propaganda machine. Once again, going back to the time when I was a kid. When I was a kid, I used to live in Europe, in the West. And there was this perspective, this narrative that the USSR in the days of the Cold War, I'm talking about the 1980s, there was this narrative that the USSR is this great propaganda monster. Everything that they say is propaganda. Right? That's the narrative that had been built up. But today, if you look at it realistically, you will see that the Western media is the biggest propaganda machine in the world. And its objective is to put forth certain narratives and to counter facts when the facts are inconvenient to the West. Now, with that in mind, why would the Western media have this anti-India bias? That's the question. So, for example, you have to look at it from this perspective. See, we use weapons that are either Atmanirbhar, made in India, like the Akash surface-to-air missile system and other systems, or we use either Russian or French weapons systems. And what the Pakistanis use is either American weapon systems or Chinese weapons systems. So when Indian weapon systems or Russian weapon systems or French weapon systems are found to be superior in combat, in battle, compared to American or Chinese systems. The Americans don't care about the Chinese systems, but when it comes to American systems, they obviously, if their systems don't perform well, then they will have fewer orders, and the entire American economy, to a large extent, depends on war, on the sales of weapons to the world, right? It's their infamous military-industrial complex. So if their weapon systems don't perform well against Indian weapon systems, French weapon systems, Russian weapon systems, then it's a problem. For them, it's gonna be hard for them to convince people to buy these things. People may think, let's go into the Indians and buy Akash systems or whatever. So that's one angle why the Americans would want to say that India has suffered losses at the hands of the Pakistanis. Yeah. Even the French systems, for example, the Americans see the French also as rivals. And also we have to remember that just a couple of days ago, the Americans and the Chinese came to some kind of agreement when it comes to trade and tariffs. And maybe a secret clause in the agreement could have been that let's throw India under the bus. because this helps the Americans as well as the Chinese, because the Pakistanis use Chinese systems as well, right? Like the missiles and the radars and whatnot. And both nations, the US and China, would like the old system to continue, and both of the nations seem to regard Pakistan as a nation that holds some value for them, especially in counterbalancing India and keeping India off balance. So if you consider all these points of view and all these facts, then you will see that both the nations, the Americans and the Chinese, have an interest in persuading the world that India hasn't done very well in the war. That's the thing.
Yeah, and I think to the point that you were saying that US has to show that the weapons it is making are superior. Pretty much during this case, I think that happened, that everyone literally saw that what Indian built systems did or what Russian built system did, and thanks to social media, that you literally cannot hide from anything, and there were things that were being shared and everything. So yeah, I think in that sense, that was one of the reasons that's why US interfered here.
Yeah, see, in today's day and age of social media, it's impossible to hide anything. If something goes down, if an aircraft goes down, let's say over Indian territory or Pakistani territory, you simply can't hide it. You can't. So if the Pakistanis claim that X number of Indian planes went down, then my point to my what I want to say to them is provide the evidence. Show us the evidence. We have all the evidence of Indian missile strikes in Pakistan. We have never heard before this what an Indian missile sounds like when it's coming, when it's homing onto the target. You can hear it coming, but you can't stop it. So it's for the first time we have seen Indian missiles striking targets from close quarters in real time. So now so in the day and age of social media, you can't hide these things, and everything has come out. But that's just how it is, So the Pakistanis have made these ridiculous claims. They have been able to show nothing, and it's clear that the Indian weapon systems or whatever we have has worked really well. For example, the Israeli Iron Dome system has thus far had the reputation of being the best anti-missile, anti-ballistic, anti-whatever missile defense system the world has ever seen. But now it's clear that whatever system India is using, which is a multi-layered system, it is superior to the Iron Dome system for several reasons. Israel is a small country. It's got a small area, square kilometers, in terms of square kilometers. The Indian western border with Pakistan and Pakistan occupied Kashmir is enormous, like more than, I think, 2,000 kilometers or something. And we have so many cities that we need to defend. So we have had this multi-layered air defense system, which includes the L-70 Bofors gun that dates back to the 1940s, but it's been enhanced with possibly AI, possibly radars, and so on and so forth. And then we have the Akash surface-to-air missile system that is tremendous. We have the Barak system, we possibly have the Pichora system, we possibly have other systems. And at the end of the day, we also have the S-400, which is used for very specific targets. So all of this has been synthesized together, and we also have drones and other things, which all create this integrated picture of the battle space. And what we saw is that this multi-layered integrated system has been able to bring everything down, whether it is drones, whether it is rockets, whether it is long-range missiles, whether it is aircraft. It's been able to bring everything down. So today, one can safely say that India has the world's best battle-tested air defense system, superior to the Israeli Iron Dome, and superior possibly to the American systems like the Patriot and the Aegis systems possibly, because those aren't really battle-tested to the extent that we have seen our system being battle-tested. So because of this, the West is not happy. The Indians, these upstarts who until yesterday nobody thought of them, today they have demonstrated these incredible capabilities in bringing down American as well as Chinese missiles, weapon systems, possibly Turkish systems drones as well, and so on, drones, F-16s, long-range missiles, everything. Incredible.
Yeah, certainly. And one more thing regarding this, do you feel that because this was so much broadcasted, like literally I think this was the trending topic for lots of people for almost a week, that China and some other major countries around India were able to figure out what are the systems that India's are attacking from, or what is their weakness that could be possibly used when another country, or if Pakistan works with China on this some other time when they are planning another attack, which they most certainly want to do. Is this going to help them?
Look, it's always a game of cat and mouse. The moment you come face to face with the adversary's weapon systems, you gain some knowledge about it, about the system. You gain some intelligence about it. And the moment you use your systems to counter that system, they gain some intel about your systems. So if they are sending 500 drones every night into India and they are all being shot down, they still can gain intel about how we are looking at targeting the drones. What are the electronic signatures of whatever we are using? What are the locations where our air defenses are located possibly, and so on and so forth. And when a war happens, other countries are keen observers and they want to learn the lessons without actually getting involved in the war themselves. So, for example, when the Armenia-Azerbaijan war happened in 2020, the first the Nagorno-Karabakh or Artsakh conflict, then the world came to see a whole different dimension, different way of doing war, using loitering drones, kamikaze drones and whatnot. It had never been seen before. Then when the Ukraine conflict started, we saw the use of drones and other AI and robotics enabled systems. We saw how anti-drone systems started evolving. You put these rigs on top of tanks to take out a drone just before it strikes you, which can actually save the people inside and possibly save the tank. So we can see all this evolving in real time. The way battle is done, the way warfare is fought, is changing very rapidly, and it's very clear that the Indian Army has learned the lessons from these wars that happened elsewhere. So we have learned the lessons, we've incorporated all those strategies and all those learnings into the way we fight. And obviously once the 3-day war happened, the Pakistanis would also have collected some intel. We also collected some intel about them. And whatever intel they collected, they're going to pass it back to their masters, whether it is in China, whether it's in Turkey, or whether it's in the US. And we also collected information about the systems they have, including the Chinese drones, the Chinese radars, the Chinese long-range missiles, Turkish drones, whatever else.
Yeah. And Abhijit sir, going back to the narrative thing that we were originally discussing in the beginning, there is one term that I came across was memory diplomacy, that many countries, especially the countries at the moment which are or were in war, they were kind of using it to build the narrative amongst their people or amongst their enemies. I never saw India because, even hailing from Kashmir myself, being a Kashmiri Pandit myself, I saw these things firsthand. That, how these things are manipulated, how these things are put up, and how the narrative is built by you, especially, yes, obviously by the government, but by the local people that are involved there. There were a lot of things that were involved here, but this time when this whole briefing of Operation Sindoor was happening, whether it was the press conferences by starting from our foreign secretary with our two lady officers to eventually the DGMOs, all was very well pinpoint and like completely accurate. Like you couldn't point out any mistake in that. So I personally think that the way everyone was showing that these were the terrorist attack that happened, whether it was the parliament attack, Pulwama, everything, there was a story that was forming. Do you think a situation like this or a scenario like this was shown very visibly for the very first time in India?
Certainly for the very first time. We have been historically very bad at putting our perspective forward. We've been really bad at it. We've had very poor PR, marketing, whatever you want to call it. I still think there's a tremendous amount of room for improvement. But what we saw, the press briefings we gave, especially the storytelling that comes in the very beginning of what the Pakistanis, their track record has been like, and what we have had to face from the Pakistanis. Once you put that on the record in the beginning, and then you put the events of the day forth, then it kind of makes a huge difference. And whatever statements we have made, we have backed all of them up with incontrovertible
Facts.
evidence, which, for example, when we did Balakot in 2019, we did not take videos of the strikes that we did, the airstrikes that we did. This time, apparently, we sent loitering drones, which went all the way into Pakistani territory and calmly filmed everything. And that's the films that we have put out. And then the satellite imagery also. So this time we've done it extremely professionally. We clearly have learned a lot of lessons from 2019, from Balakot, those events. I think there is still a whole lot more that we as a nation and we as a government can do. I think the Indian government, especially the Ministry of External Affairs, needs to have daily briefings to the world. We are no longer a small, nation in some far off corner of the world. We are kind of in the center of the Eurasia. We are one of the most important nations. We are emerging as one of the most important nations in the world. And I think we need to have daily press briefings, and the press briefings need to be in Hindi, not in a foreign language, the way we are talking to each other right now. So these things need to happen. Hopefully, the situation, the strategy evolves, but we need to demonstrate to the world that we are a nation that is important. We know how important we are. We know that we are increasingly more important as every day goes by. We need to demonstrate that we are a self-confident nation, and a nation that has self-respect and will speak in its own language instead of giving briefings in English, in a foreign language, and so on. So yeah,
But
it's an evolving situation. But what we have done thus far, these press briefings that we saw, that you referred to, very well done.
but don't you think it should be in English so that the people in the West can hear it?
When the Chinese do press briefings, do they speak in English?
Certainly not.
When the Russians do press briefings, do they speak in English? When the Germans do it, do they speak in English? When the French do it, do they speak in English? When the Japanese do it, do they speak in English? Why are we the only slave-minded nation that has to speak in a foreign language? If the foreign media wants to know what's happening in this country, they might as well learn our language. We need to have some self-respect. Smaller nations than us, significantly smaller nations, if you go to Spain, a small nation, do their press briefings, are their press briefings in English? You go to Italy, mamma mia, are there press briefings in English? No, it's in Italian. So why can't we have some self-respect? We are still slave-minded.
Yeah.
That needs to change.
Yeah. But why do you think that still exists? Because there is literally a third or a fourth generation that might be coming up after all the colonization that has happened to us. Why are we still, like, I find like a lot of my friends who would find speaking in Hindi to be very uncool. Why do you think that exists?
Terrible. So why is it like this? I'll tell you why. I mean, it's a deep-rooted problem. It's so deep-rooted, we don't even see it. We don't even realize we have this problem. Like in the beginning of this conversation, I told you that I prefer speaking English because that's the way I was raised. I'm more comfortable in a foreign language. And you know what it indicates? It indicates that I am mentally colonized. You see? So what happens? Why is this? Do we have a situation such as this in India? It's because of several factors. Firstly, the education system. Secondly, the job market. If you don't speak good English with a certain accent, you won't get a good job in this country. If you don't speak English, you will not be able to fight a court case and be there in front of the honourable justices. If you don't speak good English, people will think that your IQ points have dropped by 20 or 30. Instead of 110 IQ, you have 80 IQ maybe. That's one thing. Your teachers, if you don't speak English, will think that you aren't intelligent enough. So the entire system is geared in such a way that it mentally brainwashes us, it mentally colonizes us, and we don't even realize how deeply mentally colonized we are. And this gives us an inbuilt automatic inferiority complex. The moment somebody speaks English with a foreign accent, we automatically feel inferior to them because they speak English with a certain foreign accent that Indians can't emulate. So that needs to be fixed in this country. We need to remove English as the barrier in front of everybody.
Yeah. We have foreign influencers coming up in India speaking in Hindi, in that accented Hindi, whatever you say, and they are getting reach from us. We are the people who are watching them.
Yeah, good to see. It's a good change. Yeah.
And speaking about Hindi, I'm not sure about the people, but certainly our Prime Minister did deliver a very, very straight to the point speech that everyone saw. And I personally wanted to see this from your standpoint also, because this is something that even people may criticize me for, whatever I'm gonna say, that I personally had felt sometimes that PM Modi were being a little bit repetitive in couple of their speeches or podcasts, if you had seen, as in whatever they were saying obviously meant of huge value. But this time, when this particular press conference happened or a nation speech happened, he was straight on to the point. He didn't beat around the bush that this did good and this did good. He just was very clear with his message. And personally, to you also, Abhijit sir, when you for the first time saw this speech, PM Modi's speech, how was your reaction?
Yeah, so that speech was at 8 p.m. on whatever day it was. And that day I had a
Yeah.
live stream scheduled for 8 p.m. So I naturally had to reschedule my live stream for 9 p.m. because I cannot compete with
Yeah.
Prime Minister Modi, and I wanted to see it myself, the speech, the address to the nation. So I watched it live, and I was very impressed. I could see that the Prime Minister was clearly, at times, visibly angry, and he was not trying to be diplomatic in the address to the nation. He was very clear that we have killed X number of Pakistanis, X number of terrorists. And you typically don't use the word killed and all that, but that's the kind of language he used. Because enough is enough. How long do we keep on tolerating terrorism? And he made some very, very important points that showed to the world that what just happened those 3 days was a turning point, an inflection point from which we're never returning. For example, he said that India now has a new doctrine when it comes to Pakistan and terrorism, that any terror attack against India is now going forward going to be taken as a declaration of war or an act of war against India, and we will respond as if we are responding to an act of war. Secondly, he said that when it comes to punishing Pakistan for terrorism, we will hit you wherever we need to hit. We're not going to be confined to the border areas or some shallow surgical strike or something. We're going to hit you exactly where the roots of the terror factory are. So whether it is Rawalpindi, whether it is Karachi, whether it is whatever, we're going to hit you there. We will come inside as deep as we need to come, and we're going to hit you. And we have the capabilities to hit you. And there's nothing you can do about it. That's another thing that he said. And he also said that terror and talks can't go say hand in hand. Terror and trade can't go hand in hand. And blood and water cannot flow at the same time, which means that the Indus Waters Treaty is now in abeyance, and it will remain in abeyance as long as we don't have clear, incontrovertible evidence that the Pakistanis were completely ended and dismantled their terror infrastructure. So all that was said. It was a very good speech, a very hard-hitting speech, and it was hard-hitting because we know that he meant exactly what he was saying, and this speech essentially was an indicator of the new policy that India is going to have for going forward. And he also made it clear to the West that, guys, for example, Trump made this big statement that I have mediated and I have ensured there's a ceasefire. We made it clear that, usually when President Trump tweets about India, anything, then Prime Minister Modi makes it a point to very quickly respond very warmly to whatever Mr. Trump has said. This time,
But not this time.
This time, Prime Minister Modi completely ignored Trump's tweet, and in his speech, he made no reference to Trump or to the United States. He said that the Pakistanis approached us, asking for a ceasefire, and we have merely put a pause on Operation Sindoor. It is not a ceasefire. It's not an end of the war. We have paused it for now, and we're gonna, monitor the Pakistani behavior, and going forward, this operation can start again. So it was a very different thing from what the world was claiming happened. The Americans are saying, and Marco Rubio also made the statement that India and Pakistan have agreed that they're going to have talks at some neutral venue. That also was refuted. So it's clear the Americans have tried to interfere in some way in our internal matters. India-Pakistan war is internal matters for us, and they have tried to interfere. But that was kind of to be expected. So I think it was a great address to the nation, and it's going to go down in history as a turning point in the India-Pakistan relationship.
Certainly. And do you think PM Modi risked a bit, because you must be knowing better the geopolitics of this? Did PM Modi risk the relationship that we might be having with US, provided it's a time where they are literally putting tariff on everything that you are doing, there is a tariff on it?
Was this something that will risk the India-US relationship? I don't think it's a risk. If somebody keeps on doing terror attacks on you, you've got to respond. And if you don't respond, the world stops taking you seriously. So, yeah, temporarily Trump will be unhappy, possibly, because we did certain things that will hurt him. See, the things that we did is this. We may have destroyed a few F-16s. We may have destroyed a few transport planes, aircraft, that were given by the US. It's also the case that, wherever you have F-16s in Pakistan, you have a bunch of babysitters who will never take the F-16 out of their sight. And those babysitters, technicians, are American technicians. And they would have been on all those air bases where you had F-16s. And in case some F-16s were destroyed, it is possible that there were some technicians there, American technicians. So that's, I don't know what happened to them, or did or did not happen to them. I'm not going to speculate. But it's possible that some of that angle is also there. And so on and so forth. And the Americans clearly seem to have some kind of fondness for the Pakistani nuclear weapons. So all that is there, and I think Trump did not expect that India will go to the extent of hitting 11 air bases in 30 minutes. I don't think they ever expected that it will go to that extent, and the Pakistanis will come begging them in a panic and threatening nuclear war. If they wanted to do nuclear war, they would have done it long before 11 air bases were hit in 30 minutes. So the Pakistani nuclear bluff has been called, and maybe Trump is unhappy with what we did. We did significant damage to a valuable American asset, which is Pakistan, but it is what it is. In the future, they will take us more seriously. And when it comes to the trade war, the tariff war, he's doing it to everybody. So it's not like we are singled out and we will be, it will be that sort of thing. And we are having this trade tariff negotiations with the Americans as we speak. It's an ongoing process, and I'm sure that we have been very cooperative when it comes to this. So I don't see it as something that will endanger the India-US relationship. If it makes people unhappy, then we cannot put our national interests and make them secondary to Donald Trump's pleasure and mood. We cannot be that deferential to Donald Trump. Our national interest is paramount. When our people are killed by terrorists, we have to respond. So I think in the long run, this will be beneficial for India. In the short term, Donald Trump is clearly unhappy. Donald Trump is unhappy, and he's made some kind of deal with China. He's doing a deal with Turkey. I don't know how many $1 million, maybe $300 million worth of arms and ammunition are going to be sold to Turkey. And he's praising Pakistan. He says Pakistan makes great things. I don't know what great things they make apart from terrorists, and so on. And he was trying to arm twist Tim Cook, the Apple CEO, to not invest in India and not to manufacture more iPhones and whatnot in India, which is not going to quite work out. So Trump is that kind of guy. I understand Trump quite well. He is that sort of guy. He is a bully. He is a narcissist. He's self-centered. He's extremely erratic. He's he's very inconsistent. He constantly contradicts himself. That is the way he plays the game. If you read his book, The Art of the Deal, you will see that's part of his strategy, to be extremely unpredictable. Say one thing today, say the exact opposite thing tomorrow, and keep people off balance. So that's the way he does things. But I think it's not going to endanger the US-India relationship too much. And if it does, then there's nothing we can do about it. So we will find a way to go forward from this.
Yeah, but if you go back to this, when JD Vance was asked, very previously, that what do you feel about this particular situation? That time he said that this is none of our business. Then why all of a sudden, what happened in one night, that there was all of a sudden change in the mood of US to come in between and declare a ceasefire?
Yeah, great question. So yes, JD Vance goes to the US media. He's doing a podcast or interview or something, and he is asked about the India-Pakistan situation. And he says that the India-Pakistan situation is none of our business. Right? That's what he said. It's none of America's business. And less than 24 hours later, Trump comes and announces on Twitter, ceasefire, I have negotiated a ceasefire. So what happened is the question. What happened is that the Americans never expected the extent to which India is going to hit Pakistan. Right? We apparently took out some of their nuclear warhead storage sites. There are rumors, I don't know if they're true or not, that there's nuclear radiation leakage. I mean, it's hard to have nuclear radiation escape into the air when you're hitting a warhead, but okay. So there is rumors of that we have hit their nuclear warhead storage sites like Kirana, like Nur Khan or wherever else, Sargodha, somewhere or the other they would have had nuclear warheads possibly stored there. Definitely Kirana. So we did that. And in a matter of less than 30 minutes, we hit 11 air bases very hard. And this probably put the Pakistanis in a panic, and possibly it may have affected American personnel who were babysitting F-16 fighter planes there. Maybe it would have affected them, the Indian strikes and so on. So I think that's what put the Americans in a panic. It threw them in a panic, and they thought that India may end up completely destroying Pakistan if we let it go for another 24 hours. So I think that's where everything changed. And it's also possible that Trump would have had this contingency plan that if India pushes too far, then this is what I'm going going to do. I'm going to call up the Indians. I'm going to threaten them with so and so things that will stop doing trade with you or whatever, and I'm going to force them to stop the war. So maybe JD Vance was not in the loop. That's also a possibility. He's just the vice president. He's not the president, right?
But didn't this look quite humiliating? Like even as an Indian, when I saw this, he was speaking about this in an event or a press conference that I talk trade. I said I'll do business with you. I'll do business with you, and certainly there was a ceasefire. So he was literally saying it like India and Pakistan are literally the same parallel countries. Whereas one country is protecting itself, other country is actually attacking there. So how did you see this particular balance of him? And even he said this in his tweet also, common sense the both countries use.
Very condescending, very annoying, but I'm not surprised at all. Look, let's look at the situation very realistically, without being emotional. We, see, every nation, we are a nation, right? So we are India. We are, let's say, 6 feet tall. The Pakistanis are roughly 3 feet tall, or maybe 2 feet tall. The Americans are probably 90 feet tall compared to us. We are 6 feet, the Pakistanis are 2 feet, the Americans are 90 feet. That's how big they are. That's how powerful they are. So when they come in the way and they say stop, we've got to stop. There's nothing more we can do about it. If you want to be realistic, if you don't want your economy to be destroyed and so on and so forth. So Trump is that sort of a guy. He's an egomaniac. He's a super egoistic person. He has this, he thinks that he's the greatest negotiator in the world and is the most important person in the world. And when he's unhappy, he's going to try and be nasty to you. So it was understood from the beginning, from day one, that if the situation goes in a certain direction, if the Pakistanis come begging to the Americans will certainly come in the way of India achieving whatever it wants to achieve. It was understood from day one. If we push too far, the Americans will ask us to stop, and that's what happened. So when we hit 11 air bases in 30 minutes, I think we also expect that now is the time the Americans are going to come and ask us to stop. So yeah, I know Trump is very annoying. Kind of infuriating. He was very condescending, and he kind of put India and Pakistan on the same pedestal at the same level, and that's the sort of language he used. But that's what it is. When you are not powerful enough to talk to the Americans as equals, that's how you get treated by them. Is it humiliating? I don't think it's humiliating. It is to be expected when a way more powerful country talks about you and is unhappy. They have a track record of doing this over and over again in the past. So we have to be realistic. We have to swallow our pride about these matters. And what we need to learn from this is we need to get more powerful as a nation. We need to rise. We need to rise more.
Yeah. Then there are some people who would say that this time, in this case, India's foreign policy failed. The reason
how did it fail?
That this was I'm coming to that, like the perspective that I have been hearing, that this was the Prime Minister who legit met all the presidents of all the times, all the 3 presidents who were there in US, and was having friendships and everything with Donald Trump as well.
Okay.
So how come we were not able to negotiate even a bit for ourselves, or how come even we were not able to put the IMF's loan on halt, or at least on delay, that it's not getting passed to Pakistan? How do you see it?
Yeah,
not
I know.
My perspective.
I know that you're talking on behalf of a lot of people. So to those people, I would like to say, please grow up. Because see, when you deal with another nation, your leader, your prime minister may be personally best friends with the US president. But that personal friendship, it matters for nothing when it comes to the respective national interests of the two nations. The US president may be the best friend of our prime minister, but he is not going to allow his personal feelings and relationships to come in the way of his national interest. Similarly, our prime minister may be the best friend of so-and-so person, but that can never be allowed to come in the way of the Indian national interest. So the American national interest is different from the Indian national interest. They want to keep on ruling the world. They are the hegemon. They are the only superpower. They have power projection all over the world. They have vassal states everywhere, including East and West Pakistan. Why would they allow one of their valuable vassal states to be destroyed by India? So personal friendships don't mean a thing when it comes to national interest. And those people who ask these questions, they need to grow up beyond the third standard, right? They need to grow up a little bit. That's not how the world works. The same applies to domestic politics. The same rules apply to domestic politics within India. Two leaders, two political leaders may have great friendship, but if they're on opposite sides of the political spectrum, we know how it works. So Indians understand domestic politics so well because it is all based on human nature, but Indians fail to understand geopolitics even though the same rules and principles apply. So we need to grow up a little bit and understand that you may have the best relationships with 3 consecutive presidents, and yet if your national interest is not the same as that other nation's national interest, then there's going to be differences. And there's going to be situations like this. That's just simply how the real world works.
Yeah, and I think world politics has always been difficult to understand, and that has happened with India a couple of times previously also when it was in war, that at points when like the army or the armed forces were on the verge of doing something, there was a international interruption. So we do have a history for that. But one thing regarding that if a country like Pakistan gets support from China and Turkey openly, how come during this time India was standing alone? Like it got recognition from obviously Israel and France, but not the active support that Pakistan was getting.
See, why does Pakistan get active support? It's because it's a mercenary state and it has multiple masters. Typically, it has one master at a time, but there are times when it's serving multiple masters. And when you serve a master, your master would not want you to be annihilated because you are useful. India stands alone because we are nobody's puppet, we are nobody's vassal. We have our own interests and we are completely autonomous, we are completely sovereign as a nation. Pakistan is not a sovereign nation. In today's world, let me tell you something, there are only 5 sovereign nations in the world. I used to say 4, but now I have a 5th because I have not really paid too much attention to it. There are only 5 genuinely sovereign nations in the world: the US, Russia, China, India, and Israel. These are the only 5 genuinely sovereign nations in the world that don't serve anybody else, any other master. All other countries, in some way or the other, have to serve some master. So Pakistan is such a nation. It's a mercenary nation. It's always been from the beginning. They've always served a foreign master. So when you serve foreign masters, for example, when you serve China, because you have the China-Pakistan economic corridor, which the Chinese need to have access to the Indian Ocean, the subset called the Arabian Sea. When you are selling weapons and so on and so forth to the Pakistanis, you find some value in this country. This nation has some value for us. It serves some kind of purpose for us. That's why we need to support this nation. When you have a special relationship with Turkey, right? When you buy Turkish, when the Turks trust you enough to sell their advanced drones and other things to you, and because you have a similar kind of history and so on, both nations, Pakistan and Turkey, neither nation has a history, both have a criminal record essentially. So very similar nations, right? So once again, there is that affinity there. So the Turks will want to stand with Pakistan against India. When you have a record of serving the United States like the Pakistanis have since the 1970s onwards, the Americans see value in Pakistan. That if India in the future gets too big for its boats, we can use Pakistan to cut India down to size, even at the expense of Pakistan if need be. So Pakistan is again valuable. So when you are a mercenary nation, when you are a vassal, a puppet of multiple masters, they all will see you as a valuable asset to have in the kitty. That's why these nations will stand with Pakistan. When you are India and you are serving nobody, you are completely sovereign, it's hard to find friends. But that's okay. That's the price you have to pay for being sovereign, right? That's the price you pay for being sovereign. And India, I mean, we're not alone. We are 1.4 billion of us, and there are lots of nations that silently stand with us. We have a lot of goodwill in a lot of quarters of the world, but they keep quiet because they're not powerful enough. The whole global south, for example, is a friend of India. Every nation in Africa, I mean, what do the African nations have against us? They have a tremendous amount of goodwill with us. Even the Gulf nations have a tremendous amount of goodwill towards us. Even the Taliban prefers us over Pakistan. Even the Iranians prefer us over Pakistan. So there are lots of nations that stand with us, but the nations that make the most noise and the powerful ones, they kind of stand against us because of their own compulsions and their own interests.
Yeah. And speaking about Taliban, very recently, a couple of days ago only, I think 2 days ago only, our foreign minister, Mr. Jaishankar, made a call to the foreign minister of Taliban, and I think this is one of the first political calls that have happened. We did send a couple of months ago some envoys there, But I think this was the first direct political change of words, exchange of words.
Yes, we actually have a reasonably good relationship with the Afghan government, which is the Taliban government. You see, the Taliban do not see India as an enemy. They have no love for India for various reasons, just, religious, cultural, whatever reasons, but they simply cannot find it in themselves to see us as an enemy. Because we have this long standing track record of helping the people of Afghanistan. We don't bribe the politicians of Afghanistan and give billions of dollars to the politicians. We work on projects on the soil of Afghanistan, which helps the common man, woman, and child. Even the families of the Taliban personnel have all ended up benefiting from the projects that India has been conducting. India has invested billions of dollars in Afghanistan, which is why every Afghan trusts India. They may not love India, they may have a different religious or cultural outlook towards India, but they have no hatred for India. And they will any day take India or Pakistan. So that amount of trust is there. So yeah, that's the relationship we have with Afghanistan. Even though it's the Taliban that's in power, they still prefer us anytime, any day, over Pakistan.
But because the terrorism that happened was labeled as Islamic terrorism, and you are going toward, you're like moving your hands towards a nation that openly supports such radical Islamic terrorism to an extent, is there a chance that you could be backstabbed?
Look, if you put yourself in a position that's vulnerable, then you may possibly in a future time be in a position where you can be backstabbed. But if you do not put yourself in a vulnerable position where your belly or your back is exposed, then there's no question of being backstabbed ever, right? Now, when it comes to the Taliban government, some people will, especially the West, will call them terrorists. But it's also interesting that the Taliban receives about between $50 to $100 million per week in cash as a stipend from the United States government. So the US government has no issue using the Taliban government as one of their proxies to serve certain purposes for them, like keeping the Chinese out, maybe keeping the Russians out to a certain extent, so on. There must be some kind of understanding. The Doha Accord had some secret clauses that we have not been told about. Okay? So the Americans are perfectly fine working with terrorists. Who they call terrorists. Donald Trump.
For their own favors.
Yeah, just a couple of days ago, Donald Trump met with the so-called president of Syria, who until recently had a $10 million bounty on his head from the FBI.
From FBI.
Right? And today the president of the US is standing with him shoulder to shoulder. The Americans will work with anybody and everybody. They will work with terrorists if they need to. If Osama bin Laden had not been killed in 2000 whatever, and if he had somehow survived until today, it's possible Trump would have been standing shoulder to shoulder with Osama bin Laden also, if it served his country's interests. So that's how it is, right? Now the Taliban has no enmity with India. They have never, in the past 20 plus years, done a thing that hurts India's national interests. So I think as long as we can verify that they are trustworthy on a daily basis, perhaps, then we can work with them. We can work with anybody in that matter.
Yeah, certainly. I think that would something that time only tell. And talking about psychological warfare part of this, the current situation that we were in, I personally saw this. Obviously, I have personally seen this couple of times because of the things that we are doing. We are creators. We are creating content. We meet a lot of people, and we see people creating content both pro and anti-India. But this time,
including Indians,
felt like. Yeah, including Indians. But this time it felt like, there was not only, I think General Bakshi also mentioned this, that we are not fighting a two-front war. Like we are fighting a 2.5 front war. We are basically the half of the war. We also have to fight within with people who want to put India down, who want to put the narrative that we are failing. We are failing in terms of foreign policy. We are failing in terms of responding in terms of military. So how do you see this current scenario, provided you have such a neighbor who is going to certainly do something? How psychological warfare is going to impact India in the future?
Psychological warfare is a very important component of warfare. It's all about playing with the psyche of a nation, playing with the morale of a nation. And if the nation's morale is down, it's very hard for that nation to do well. So psychological warfare is all about propaganda. It's all about the social media narratives, the media narratives, and so on. So one thing a nation can do to hurt a country's morale is to have unleash the media ecosystem on that country. So have all the think tanks write nasty things about that country. This country, for example, India supports Putin. India has stood against the civilized world. India has supported Putin's invasion of Ukraine, and blah blah blah. Go on and on and on. So you can tar a nation with any brush you want. You can put any paint, any color paint you want on a nation, as long as you have a whole lot of disposable minions who will do the writing for you. So you have all the think tanks that will do the writing for you. Then you have all these, see the West, the US, the entire West is essentially a vassal of all the Western nations, EU nations, NATO nations, and so on, are vassals of the US.
Could you describe like what a vassal state is?
What's a vassal state, right? It's a nation. Yeah. It's a nation that has lost its sovereignty to you in some way. Okay, so let's say I am a big hegemon. I'm a big superpower, and I don't want to put boots on the ground all across the world to rule the world. I want to rule the world indirectly. So what will I do? I will create alliances. I will create, let's call something NATO, North Atlantic Treaty Organization. So I will say that every nation that becomes a member of NATO, I will guarantee their security. You don't have to spend a dime on security. My military will take care of you. But you have to give full access to your military and to your territory to my soldiers when I ask you to. And in exchange, if there's an attack on you, I will consider it an attack on me. So that nation's military and its resources now comes under my dominion. So we create a NATO command, which will be controlled by me quietly. But it looks like it's an independent entity. So when you do this, all the nations that become members of NATO lose 100, they will still have, let's say, 50% control over the military, but they no longer have 100% control over their military, right? When you become a member of the EU, which is an economic bloc, then you lose access, then you lose control over your borders. You lose control over who comes in and who comes out of your nation. You lose control over your economy because you no longer have a currency of your own, and so on. So by doing all these things, you silently can break down the sovereignty of nations. When it comes to nations like Japan or South Korea, you can put 130 military bases on each nation. So you are physically, militarily occupying the nations. So that's how you divest nations of their sovereignty, and that's how you make them your vassals. Now, in some cases, if you have a nation like some African nations, you simply appoint a dictator who's in your pocket. So let's say there's a strongman, a military strongman over there. You talk to him. You listen, I'll guarantee your security. I'll give you weapons, the weapons you need. You do whatever you want with your country. I don't care. You are my guy. You may be a SOB, but you are my SOB. Right? And in exchange for that, you have to allow me to plunder your country's mineral wealth. No questions asked. And you will be a billionaire. You will have access to the whole world. So that's the deal you do with African nations. That's the deal you do with the Pakistanis. That's the deal you do with Saddam Hussein, as long as he is useful to you, and so on. So that's how you make nations your vassal states. Lots of different ways of doing it. Got it?
Yeah, certainly. So could we say that the current visits that Trump is doing to Middle East, it is like he's trying to make more vassal states, or he's trying to engage the vassal states that already exist?
What he's doing, see, all the nations in the Middle East, first of all, if you simply take a look at the map of the Middle East, if you think beyond what your school textbooks taught you and your teachers taught you, then you will see something very strange. You will see that there are straight lines on the map. Straight lines. Even if you look at the map of Africa, the political map of Africa, you will see straight lines that were drawn as if, somebody took a ruler and a pencil and drew a line on a piece of paper. So these nations that have been created in Africa, nation states, and in the Middle East, these have been artificially created. These did not evolve naturally. Okay? Out of geopolitical evolution. These were created by the West, Iraq, and Israel, and Saudi Arabia, and so on, all these nations. So from the very beginning, from the inception of these nation states, there was always the behind the scenes domination of the West. So these nations have always been vassals of the West. They all served specific purposes for the West. For the Gulf nations, mainly it was all about oil through Suez and whatnot. And later, the Americans did something to their currency. It was no longer backed by gold. It became the petrodollar. So then oil becomes even more important. That's why the nations like Saudi Arabia and Kuwait and Iraq, etc., were very important for the West. So these have always been, you can say, vassals of the West. And what Trump is doing right now is consolidating the vassalhood and extracting more concessions or more. He's getting them to pay more tribute to the United States. So Oman gives Trump a $300 or $400 million jet aircraft, and then the Saudis agree to buy 300. I don't know how many $1 billion worth of equipment, arms equipment from the Americans. So they are paying tribute to the overlord. That's what's going on. He is the all-powerful emperor of the United States. He obviously serves somebody too. Everybody has to serve some master.
Who is he serving to?
Well, he serves the unelected deep state. So the US is a very peculiar nation, okay? We think of the US as a democracy, okay? Ask me, let's compare the US and India. In India, we have hundreds, maybe thousands of political parties. A political party for each state. Every state has multiple political parties. Every religious group has multiple political parties, and so on. In the US, you have two political parties, or that matter. You may have 2, 3 here and there, but they don't matter. The only two political parties that matter are the Republicans and the Democrats. It's a two-party state, which actually, my friends, is one step above, just one step above a one-party system like China or North Korea. And both parties have the same foreign policy, the same economic policy when it comes to the world. So it's a uni-party state. It's actually an autocracy masquerading as a democracy, and they give lectures to the world about democracy. And it's the nation with the worst human rights record in the history of the universe, actually. Right? So if you look at it, if you look at the nation realistically, you will understand it's an empire. It's nothing. It's no different from the classical imperial system that you've always had, like Rome and whatnot. Right? So that's what the US is. It's an autocracy. It's an empire masquerading as a democracy.
Do you think with the getting Elon Musk inside the cabinet this time was, I think, a step ahead of the deep state that we are referring to? As in, like, this time the deep state, if to be said, was present more evidently in front of the world.
You were referring to the deep state. I did not quite answer that, right? So let me first answer that, then I'll talk about Elon Musk. So when you have a nation that's autocratic like that, it means that it has some kind of center of power somewhere, right? So presidents come and go. Sometimes presidents can be 1963, like Kennedy was 1963, wasn't he? So when presidents become inconvenient, they are 1963. So presidents come and go, but the policies never change, and wherever the true power resides, it remains and it continues. So I think that I'm pretty sure that every nation has, to some extent, some kind of unelected center of power that is extra democratic and extra electoral in nature. The United States certainly seems to have something like that. Who those individuals are, we don't know. I would not hazard a guess. But we know one thing, that the Federal Reserve Bank of the US, it's a private entity, and its stakeholders, shareholders, are not known to the world. And this private entity decides it governs the economy of a nation, of the most powerful nation and the biggest economy in the world. Nobody can deny the fact that the Federal Reserve is a privately held entity. And nobody can deny the fact that its stakeholders, shareholders, are unknown. I mean, they say that it's this corporation, that corporation, it's all well known, but it's actually very nebulous and essentially impossible to get to the bottom of. So that's the kind of nation it is. So it's a small group of people who own the nation, essentially, right? So that's what I mean. So when you become the president of the US, you essentially probably have some kind of secret ceremony where you kiss the ring, like in The Godfather. You have to kiss the ring so as to get the job.
But you never know who you are kissing to.
You may kiss the ring of a representative, perhaps, or something. I'm not saying it literally. I mean it figuratively. Okay. So I had said this last year, okay, before the election, that if Trump, I had said it's very unlikely that Trump will become president, but if he does become president, it will mean that he has kissed the ring of the deep state. So that's what has happened. Now, when it comes to Elon Musk, he is the world's richest man right now, more or less, which means that he's one of the poorest people in the deep state. and he serves the deep state. Okay,
How does that work?
I'm just hazarding a guess. Okay, my point is the people who would make up the deep state would be richer than anybody can imagine and more powerful than anyone can imagine. And people like Bill Gates and Elon Musk, they may be honorary members at the lowest levels of the deep state. And whatever Elon Musk does, I'm sure it serves the interests, the geopolitical and economic interests of the deep state. Yeah. And I can assure you that Trump and Elon Musk, as time goes by, they will not see eye to eye, because there's only room for one alpha male in the top position
In the room.
and Elon Musk may be more ambitious and more brash and more everything else than Trump, and he definitely is more successful and richer than Trump, so it won't work long term.
Certainly. And why not a country like Russia or China, which were like equally developing, growing in all terms, if they were like democratic, open to the world and everything, would they have replaced US at some point?
Democracy is something that hampers a nation. It doesn't help a nation. When you have democracy, there's inertia, there is entropy, there's friction within the nation. The decision making goes through lots of levels before the actual implementation is done. When you have an autocracy like the US or China or even Russia, so to say, things get done very fast. So in the 21st century, nations that are the most agile and the quickest to go from decision making to action, they are the nations that will rule the world. If you are a democracy, you're not going to rule the world. So if China becomes a democracy, it is going to be left behind, back by the wayside, roadside. The same goes for Russia. The Americans have done such a great job of promoting democracy while being an autocracy and while being an imperial system. So they have fooled the world into believing that democracy is the right way to go about it, while they themselves are not a democracy. So I think that if China or Russia become democracies, they'll be left by the wayside. Now, when it comes to China and Russia, they are not as powerful or as developed as the US. The Chinese are the only nation that seems to be trying to catch up and doing a very good job actually at catching up technologically with the US. And that's why the Americans have a big issue with China. But China is now a gigantic economy, way larger than India, definitely like four times roughly, 3.5 or 4 times as big as India. We are what, a $4 trillion economy? The Chinese will be 18, 19 trillion. So more than 4 times, almost 5 times as big as India, and so on. So the Americans worry about China, and they worry about Russia also, because Russia has certain technological advancements and capabilities, and because Russia has the world's largest arsenal of nuclear weapons and the means to deliver them wherever they want. So these are the reasons why the Americans are worried about the Russians and the Chinese, not so much about the Russians as much as the Chinese. And they don't want a nation like India in the future, by a 2040, 2050 horizon, to become the next potential China. And that's why they are taking steps right now to, hopefully from their perspective, clip our wings.
Yeah, that's evident, pretty much evident. And one more thing regarding the psychological warfare aspect that we were discussing. Like, I never saw you actually discuss this perspective. Yeah, if you have done, I must have missed that. That the way pop culture, or in simpler terms, these entertainment people, movie stars, singers, all these people, how when a scenario like this comes up, they have been put into the limelight, right? Just say, for example, in the recent example of Operation Sindoor, from the likes of Mr. Shah Rukh Khan to Diljit Dosanjh, there were people who were blamed that they didn't speak about Operation Sindoor, right? So when, as a geopolitical expert, you see this scenario and you see these faces not talking about it, what is your personal take regarding such entertainment figures not talking about such things?
Look, my personal perspective, this is my personal perspective on this. My perspective...
Not as a geopolitical person.
It's not a geopolitical perspective, it's my personal perspective. My perspective is that entertainers should never be treated as role models. Entertainers, their job is to pretend to be something they are not. He or she is an actor. They are acting and taking the role of some character which may probably have nothing to do with them. So in India, we are a bunch of super emotional people in India. If some actor plays a Deshbhakta role, a patriotic role, we start believing that that actor himself is a patriot and Deshbhakt. Then next, you will see that actor is playing a villain. Then we get disappointed. We Indians are so easy to manipulate. My point is, why do we consider entertainers to be role models? use them for entertainment, don't take them seriously. But in this day and age, we see entertainers as role models and sports people as role models. I would say sports people are still at a higher level than entertainers. At least they do the hard work and they perform for the country in an arena, in a contrived situation, not in an actual war. But sports is kind of a substitute for war, and it takes a tremendous amount of hard work and talent, etc., to succeed at the highest level. So I have more respect for sports people. But even sports people these days, they have commercial interests and all, and they prefer to stay out of these matters, uh, especially if they have audiences outside of India that matter for them commercially, right? And that's why you'll see people apologizing to Pakistan, people kind of staying away from the whole matter, especially various actors, actresses. So my point is, why do Indians take these people seriously? These people, they have no loyalty probably to the nation. Their only loyalty is to their income streams, and they will do nothing that will jeopardize their income streams, or even give them a setback of 5-10%. Even that is a lot. So why do we take them seriously? We should stop taking entertainers seriously.
But don't you think, sir, that using their influence that they have, there is a strong message that could be sent out to the people for building the perception, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's true. It's true. When the whole country worships a bunch of entertainers, if those entertainers play the role of an actor, character, whatever, and put out a patriotic, nationalistic message, then it would definitely make a difference to a certain extent. And they choose not to do that. So it tells you a lot about these people and what they truly are like. They don't have a sense of patriotism. We have very senior, respected figures in the entertainment industry who have stayed silent for a very long time. But when some movie is coming up, they will have to put out the obligatory patriotic message so that people will come and watch the movie and so on. So that's the way it is. So they certainly can play a positive role if they choose to, if they wish to, if they desire to. But they prefer not to do that. So that should tell the people of India what these people are truly made of. And we need to stop wasting our time and our money on their entertainment. That's my message.
Yeah, actually, the example that you're giving happened recently with a very big star. His movie is releasing in June only. If you're I could even name the person at the moment, but you're okay if I say that? Yeah. So Mr. Amir Khan, for example, this happened with him. He made a post about the Operation Sindoor and how he's very much proud of the country. And then just after 24 hours, the movie that he's releasing, Sitare Zameen Par, he released the trailer of it.
Okay, so because the movie is coming out, it's important to sound patriotic.
Yeah.
And you know, the sad thing is that it fools our people. Our people are so gullible that they fall for these tricks. That's the sad thing.
But I think thanks to social media, it didn't happen this time. He's getting huge backlash because he was also in news for going to Turkey and saying that I feel safe here. This is like a home to me and all of that. I don't feel safe in India and things like that.
Please move to Turkey, sir. Go and live on in Beşiktaş or on the sea, on the coast of the Bosphorus. Please move to Turkey. I'm sure Mr. Erdogan, Mrs. Erdogan will treat you as a foster son. Please, sir, move out if you're not feeling safe in India. Become Turkish.
And with that, we were saying, even some celebrities who made the post, then there was a line of producers, directors, you won't believe, have registered or have filed for registration for the trademark Operation Sindoor, so that they could make a movie about it in future.
So it's all about their commercial interests. It's all about making the next big movie. Yeah, that's how it goes with these people. I'm not surprised. I think it's high time Indians wake up about all this.
Yeah. And even Abhijit sir, concluding the conversation here that we had and giving the gist of it, at the moment even I was thinking about this, and we discussed this a lot, that overall, if you see our conversation, we said this so many times that US is superior than us. They are much better than us, and certainly they are 90 foot tall and we are 6 feet tall. So certainly they have done this at everywhere. They have done this in the world of software. They are doing this in the world of diplomacy. They try to say that India cannot do and you have to go there. And then eventually once you settle there, you are there and then you can change the world, right? So this perception has been inculcated in Indians, a lot of Indians, for a very long time, right? So to all the Indians, especially aspiring Indians, I would say in the early age, who believe in such things, what would be your piece of advice for them?
My piece of advice to them is that we were once the greatest nation in the world. Technologically, from a perspective of culture and from a perspective of prosperity, we were the nation that accounted for at least a third of the entire world's GDP for the for the major part of recorded history. So we have done that in the past. We were the world's largest net exporter of culture, of science, of knowledge, of everything. We were genuinely the Vishwaguru thing that these days has become kind of a parody, right? So we were that. It means that we can again become that. We need to have a national mission. Each of us needs to do something, whatever we can, in our own small capacity to contribute to the national mission. The national mission is that if the Americans are 90 feet tall, why can't we be 100 feet tall in, let's say, 30 years? We can do that. We have all the potential because we have done that in the past, so we can do it again in the future. So all Indians need to raise their standards, stop wasting time on petty things, stop craving the white man's validation. We should no longer care what the CNN says or BBC says, right? Forget about what they say. Why should we care about it? We should put our heads down. We should all work in whatever capacity we can. Whether you are a software engineer, whether you are an architect, whether you sell vada pavs on the street, whatever you do, do it well. Do it to the best of our ability, and think of this as being a national mission. That we're going to raise our GDP. We want to be at $10 trillion in, let's say, by 2030 perhaps, and by 2047 we should be at 30 trillion or whatever dollars, maybe $50 trillion. So that's the kind of growth we want to see for the nation. And each individual in their own capacity can contribute to it by raising their standards and working really hard. So that's what everybody can do. We have to be optimistic. We have to be super positive. Lots of Indians are kind of negative about a lot of things. You need to change the attitude and become positive and optimistic and energetic. So I think we can all do that together.
Yeah, and I think the Gen Z has always been blamed to be very outspoken or very arrogant sometimes. But the good part here is that this generation, if explained this thing properly, that this is what we have to believe in, would take that forward in comparison to maybe a millennial or a generation previously. Because they kind of are still to a large extent going through that intergenerational trauma, that we were colonized, we were ruled by someone. So the feeling of freedom is, I think, something that we can expect from a Gen Z perhaps.
Yeah, absolutely.
Too much expectation.
Absolutely. I mean, yeah. Whatever qualities each generation has, they need to use those qualities to take us all forward. I think Gen Z has a lot of good qualities. They question, they ask questions. Previous generations never asked questions. They were diffident. Gen Z asks questions. It's a good quality. They may have some bad qualities. I don't care. Let's look at the good. So they ask questions, and the only way to progress in the world is by asking questions and gaining more knowledge. So from that perspective, it's great, with Gen Z.
Yeah, certainly. And I guess that would be the place where I would conclude this. And thank you so much to you, Abhijit sir. You have been quite busy for last few weeks. Thank you so much for sparing some time for us.
Thank you so much for having me on the podcast. Appreciate it.
Thank you, sir.